Welcome to DubLife Diaries, the podcast where passion meets the open road. I'm Joe Person, your host and also a lifelong dubber. Buckle up because this ride is just beginning. This podcast is sponsored by Volksmania magazine. Good times, great cars, awesome Volksmaniacs. Visit Volksmania.com to learn more about this class-leading VW magazine. All right, guess who's back? We're back with part two because, no joke, Jake Raby's roots run so deep they might actually be power and half of the American Industrial Revolution. I say that kind of kidding, but also kind of not. Last time we barely scratched the surface, so time to kind of warm it up again. Today we're diving into everything from a family-built power plant inside of a cult, which I can't wait to hear about, to working for Ford, Edison, Firestone, hopefully those names sound familiar to a lot of you, to testing early drones or something like it, all the way back in 1916. Holy crap, this conversation is going to be awesome. And then to the invention of a wireless communication device that came out long before a lot of people even had electricity. And yeah, you heard that properly. A wireless communication device. So we're going to dive into it. We're going to hear all about it. This one's definitely going to get crazy. Before we do, though, let me give a couple quick shout outs. Volksmania magazine, my sponsor, number one, Volksmania.com. You guys know the drill. I feel this is probably one of the flyest VW magazines on the face of the planet. It's not just the quality of the actual product itself, it's the people. Just like our community, it's the people, and that's what makes Volksmania so special. Paul, the team, awesome folks. Shout out to Salty Dub. From the beach to the bay, Salty Dub is tearing up the VW scene, especially coastal West Coast, Central Florida, which is where I'm at. Big, shows. Shout out to the Pier. V-Dubs on the Pier is January 24th. That's going to be an awesome show. We got 247 spots on the iconic St. Pete Pier, downtown St. Pete. That's going to be an awesome show. But anyway, on the website, you can register. We've also got a bunch of swag items and stuff on the website, saltydub.com. Use the discount code DubLife10. That'll work on Volksmania magazine as well for U.S. subscribers. And then lastly, I want to publicly recognize my buddy Gary Miller, who is you guys might know him as the VW Jawbreaker on YouTube. Stand-up dude and just a amazing supporter of what I'm trying to build here in this podcast and the community. He's always giving me support and sharing my stuff. And I put up a post yesterday about, moving into 2026, trying to have a plan, right? I'm trying to do it smart and trying to see if I can pick up some sponsors. And man, he's the first guy that inboxed me right away and was like, hey man, how can I support you? So Gary, shout out, man. Thank you so much for your support. All right. I'm done with the shout outs, Jake. It's back to you. So, hey man, people kind of went nuts over part one. So hopefully we'll get that same reaction. I know you said you tuned in, listened to a little bit of it, but typically when I put a podcast episode out, I do it on Saturdays. This time I did it on a Sunday because of the holiday. And, I'm a little nosy, so I'll look at the episode, when I first put it out, I'll check in 10 minutes, like how many times has it been downloaded, right? Yours was like 50, almost 60 times in like less than 10 minutes, which is pretty cool. It's over 1,000 now, and which is awesome, but it's also on pace because I average about 2,000 now per. Who cares though? Enough of me. Back to you. You listened a little bit. Based on our last conversation, do you feel like I missed anything from that last talk?
Not really. I think that we covered things pretty well. I mean, we might could have talked a little bit more about, the lawnmower that I bought when I was 8 years old that led to me getting to my first Volkswagen. Maybe we can talk about that at the end of this, this
Okay.
evening, because it's kind of crazy when you got a drunk guy that lives in a concrete house with no windows, and then your neighbor lives in a school bus across the creek. And he's the guy that taught you how to adjust valves, and he stays drunk all the time. Um, and I still, the first special tool I ever got was a wooden input shaft, clutch alignment tool that guy gave me. His name was Bear. is what he went by. He lived in this bus down by the creek, and he gave me that, and I still got it.
Wow.
I actually still use it. I could use other things, but we probably could have touched on that a little bit just because it was the very, very, very beginning. But other than that, it was great. And I think the reason why a lot of people might have been, kind of tuning in the way they are is because I'm a little bit of the unknown guy, right? I'm not in the scene. People know my work, they know what I do, but because I don't go to these shows and I don't do this and I don't do that, um, I don't post a lot anymore. It's just a little bit of a mystique. You can't just stop by and see. I'm not like in Southern California or on the beach somewhere like all these other people. Um, and I think because of that, there's a bit of a mystique that kind of drives people to want to learn the backstory and what I'm doing. So,
Yeah, yeah, sure. Mystery, I think it creates value, especially in somebody that's as accomplished as you are. Through multiple avenues, and we're about to talk about them even more through your family history. So let's go back and start at the top from the second batch of information I got from you, which was your grandfather invented the Raby oscillating gas engine in 1912. So,
so let's go back even further than that
okay, let's
because
do it.
because this December 1st was my grandfather's birthday in 1872. And we're going to talk a little bit about why my grandfather's 103 years older than me. So, yeah, but that's just kind of funny. When you decided to do this episode on December 1st, I was like, well, that's odd because that's my grandfather's birthday, but I never told you that.
That is
Um,
so cool. So here we are, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
So a little bit of that story. So he when my folks came here from Germany, they were basically kicked out of Germany for religious purposes. They came here and they settled in Ohio, in Loudonville, Ohio. And what's unique about what I'm going to tell you is that none of this was told to be as a kid. My grandfather, everything about him, all my dad told me about him was he was tax assessor in Lee County, Florida for 40 years, and he built a power plant that was at a state park that's down there. That's all he told me. And then he did tell me a little bit about this and that. He invented some things. He did this, but there was never any real stories. And even when I asked, he wouldn't tell me. And then I learned why after my dad passed away. And I also learned why my dad carried a Buckeye in his pocket. Well, because his family was from Ohio. I didn't know this. So, about 2 weeks after my dad passed away, this long lost cousin who I didn't know existed found me because she saw my dad's obituary and looked me up. And she started telling me things I never knew. And then I started on newspapers.com and I started Googling and I started figuring things out. And she had crazy photos that she didn't know who these people were. And then I figured out who they were, and then that's when the whole cult thing came in, and it's an amazing story. So if I may, I'll start kind of at the beginning, right, with that. So
let's do it.
Loudonville, Ohio, okay, and I got some pictures you can throw up of this, but some brothers, my grandfather included, he was one of the younger, but they actually had the first Ford dealership in the state of Ohio, but they were selling Ford tractors and other type implement stuff. And then they went to cars. And in 1885, they started Raby Family Hardware. It's on Highway 39 in Loudonville, Ohio. It's still there today. It is the longest family ran hardware store in the country. It's now on its sixth generation of Raby ownership.
Oh my
I went there with my wife on the 125th anniversary of the hardware store after we learned all this stuff, and it's an amazing place. It's still in the same building, and they all the brothers they actually built an elevator, but so when they got cars or tractors, the stuff came in pieces. they would lift this stuff to the top where it was warmer inside in the wintertime, and they would put these things together and then hoist them back down. There's this huge elevator that works from ballast. So it's all made out of oak, and you stack weight on it until you get enough weight to lift it up what you're trying to lift up. It's still
Wow.
there, it still works. So when I saw that, it just blew my mind. So that's where it started, Loudonville, Ohio. So also from Loudonville, Ohio, and went to school with my grandfather was a guy named Charles Kettering. Okay, you can look him up. He started AC Delco. So you've got batteries, spark plugs, coils, all that sort of thing. And then you go back and you start looking at some of my grandfather's advertisements from around 1909, 1910, in that time period in the newspaper in Fort Myers. And you see that he's got batteries and he's got spark plugs and he's got coils and he's got this stuff nobody has, right? And nobody knew where he was getting them from. But then I'm like, he had the back door with Charles Kettering. That's where the stuff was coming from. So Kettering basically created the ignition system for GM. And so when you go buy AC Delco parts today,
Yeah.
that started out as Charles Kettering's company. So they went to school together. So my grandfather ended up, and a lot of this is put together from pieces here and there, right? Some of it can be confirmed. Other parts of it are kind of interpolated based on where he was at the time and what was going on, and letters that got sent home and pictures that we've got. And there was a lot of stuff in the newspapers, a tremendous amount of stuff in the newspapers. So basically, there was a time period there around 1900. My grandfather was a young man. Everybody else in the family stayed in Loudonville. They were farmers. They didn't go anywhere. My grandfather left. And that's why Maggie, my cousin, had a hard time finding anything about him, because he didn't stay there. So he learned to run the telegraph, and he got on the railroad, and he was a telegraph operator. That took him one time to Chicago. So he stayed in Chicago for a while, and on the 1900 census, he was in a boarding house with Orville and Wilbur Wright, and with a fellow named Cyrus Reed Teed, who started the Koreshan Unity, which is what we're going to talk about. That's the cult. So this Teed guy, okay, he basically scammed a lot of people. And he was doing a lot of stuff with alchemy and all this crazy electrotherapy back in the early days of electricity. And he was using electricity to treat people, but he was really like a snake doctor, right? So basically, he was shocked and had this divine epiphany or something where a siren came to him and told him that the earth was hollow and that we were living inside of it. And the sun was a central sun. And when we looked at the sun, we were looking at the center, the nucleus of the earth, and that our gravity was created by centrifugal force of the earth spinning. So this is Koreshanity is what this is called. This is the belief of the hollow shell. So basically, my grandfather was a typesetter working in a printing house that was partially owned by the Wright brothers. And I found this out later down the road. And this printing house, he was a typesetter, and he also did stuff on the railroad. But he was responsible for the printing of a magazine called The Flaming Sword. And the Flaming Sword magazine was the magazine of the Koreshan following. So basically,
Hmm.
this Teed guy created a bunch of BS. That's all it was. And he started writing about it and created this huge following of up to 10,000 people worldwide. Okay. So he was going to go to South Florida, to Estero Island near Fort Myers, and he was going to start the New Jerusalem, is what he was going to do. And it was going to be, its own community. So he started this in Chicago and got a good following. And I've got things, my grandfather was, teaching alchemy and physics and all this crazy stuff, astrophysicism, in 1901 at an opera hall in downtown Chicago. I've got a flyer about this. So he was also, since he did a lot with electricity, he became the director of electrical engineering for this cult, the Koreshan Unity. So you fast forward a little while, and a fellow named Dom Kohler, a German guy, had this 300 acres in Estero Island. Well, Teed went down and basically conned the guy out of his land, okay, and said, "We need this for the New Jerusalem." I don't know if he paid him, I don't know, but he got the land from this guy to start the Korean Unity. So they all start migrating there. And you have to think about what South Florida was in 1900, right? It was a jungle, snakes and bugs and the heat. Just
Swamp.
imagine how bad. I mean, imagine how hot it is there now in July. Imagine that when you have no AC, you have no bug spray, you have none of this. So
Yep.
they went down and took this jungle island and turned it into this community. So my grandfather went there about 1903 or 4. And one of the pictures that my cousin Maggie had was a picture of my grandfather sitting on a park bench with a bunch of bamboo behind him. Well, I knew that my grandfather was friends with Edison because my dad told me he used to go over to Edison's house and play in Edison's lab after Edison died, and he would like go in there and break beakers and all kinds of stuff and put on his old rubber shoes and all this crazy stuff because my dad lived right down the road from Edison's home place. So I knew there was a connection. So Edison was doing a lot with Firestone on rubber trees and all this. And I saw the bamboo and I thought for sure that was at Edison's place. But then I go down to Estero with my wife after we learned about all this, and there's a landing. So you came in on the river, right? And you come in on a landing. At that landing, you give up all your earthly possessions to the cult. And basically, the dude had a pawn shop and he sold all your stuff. Basically, okay. So it was an early pawn shop. So he took all your stuff because you didn't need it. It was a cult. It was socialism, right? I mean, everybody was helping each other. So you didn't need whatever you brought in there. You didn't even need money. So ultimately, I see this landing and I look and I see this bench and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the bench that I got a picture of my grandfather at that I thought was at Edison's, but it was here. So that was him checking into the cult, right? So he gets there and he's named the director of electrical engineering. Now, there was a lot of smart people that fell for this. A lot of smart people. People from all over the world came here. Some people escaped, World War One to come here from Germany. One lady came here before World War II to escape because she knew she probably was going to be rounded up, and she was actually one of the last Koreans there. Was there all the way to the 60s, but basically they formed this cult. They formed this community, and it had the planetary court. All this stuff was there, and you can go look all this up. But supposedly, this T guy that started it was supposed to be immortal. And this is his first mistake. Really, his first mistake was he made it celibate. So when you went there, celibacy was practiced. I don't know how you're going to grow a cult or a following if you have celibacy, right? You got to really recruit a lot of other people. But I think that was mistake one. Mistake two, he said he was going to be immortal. Well, so all these things start happening. Teed also had some inventions. They were all extremely smart people. And I think the reason why the extremely intelligent people were kind of brought to this is because they were always thinking there was more out there. They were thinking more scientific rather than religiously, right? Like they're so out there that they're thinking, yeah, there's got to be more to this than what the Bible says. There's gonna be more to this than what we're being told, right?
Right.
And that's why I think it recruited a lot of that type of person. So ultimately, at the end of the day, my grandfather started in 1906. They had a machine shop there that I've actually been into, and he created, along with a guy named Alfred Christensen, who did mostly the mechanical side. They made a power plant. It's still there today. It still operates. I've seen it run. They run it in the winter, usually January or February. It started out as steam powered, and then it went to a Fairbanks Morse diesel engine, which is what it has today. And doesn't have glow plugs. You have to actually light a fuse, and you can see. I've actually got a video of it running and starting up. So the small little one-cylinder air compressor builds air pressure to end up creating air for the air starter to work, and that turns the engine over. And they took water from the river and ran water up into it to cool those steam engines or the diesel engine. And what I thought was the most unique part of the whole thing is as they're generating power, and a lot of this power didn't just power the first community in the world with full electric power to every dwelling. That's really what it was. The first ever in the world, as far as anybody knows, full community with every building powered. And my grandfather wired every bit of that. They also sold power to the city of Fort Myers because the city of Fort Myers did not have power over the whole city. So I found things in the newspaper articles where my grandfather was running the power lines into the city of Fort Myers from the cult. So basically, the cult sold them power, but the cult wanted that because they wanted to have leverage out in the community because nobody liked them, right? So that's why my grandfather ran for tax assessor and he won because they wanted their people to be out in the community and to be influential and to keep the cult there and to keep people away.
Wow.
So my grandfather actually got in trouble. You can see some, if you Google newspaper articles, you see where he's in trouble for not charging the cult enough taxes because he was tax assessor.
Dude, crazy.
So basically at that point,
it's kind of gangster a little bit.
Oh, it's extremely intelligent. They had their hands in every aspect of this, right?
Yeah, man. That's
so, and they were also inventing things. They were developing things. They were learning stuff nobody else could learn. So the most unique part of the generator that I really like more than anything is there's a cooling tower outside, and basically the discharge water that comes from the cooling system runs over a radiator to cool it, but they incorporated a shower into it. So you could take a warm shower in 1906 because you're taking a shower in the discharge water coming off of this, at the time, steam engine, right? So just ingenious people. I mean, the machine shop's still there. The blacksmith shop's still there. This is called now the Koreshan State Park. You can go see my grandfather's power plant. You can see it run.
wow.
Now, you're talking about something crazy. So I didn't know any of this. And my mom passed away in 1990. And my dad and I used to go to Florida all the time and hog hunt and stuff. My brother still lives down there. So we actually stayed at this state park in a camper in 1991. And my dad never told me that 500 yards away was a power plant my grandfather built in 1906.
Did he know?
Never. Yeah, absolutely, he knew because my dad used to go there when he was a boy. We found newspaper articles because back in the day, if somebody went to visit somebody, they'd put it in the newspaper. And we said, my dad's name was Harry, and it says, little Harry came to so-and-so's house at the Unity, and they came from Freedom. They called town Freedom. And they came from Freedom to visit so-and-so at the Unity. It was in the newspaper. So my dad had to know it. He had to know it.
No, I would agree.
But he was very ashamed of it. I think that's what it was.
Okay.
It was a shameful thing because of how crazy that this was. But they had their own orchestras. They had all of this. And my grandfather had created a wireless communication system. And it was first wired, then it was wireless across this whole thing. Like you could send telegraph messages to so-and-so's house. You could do all this. And then he invented the wireless telegraph before Marconi, but he didn't have any money to do anything with it. So that newspaper article that I sent you about the wireless telegraph,
Yeah.
it's like 6 pages long. He was trying to get investors to give him some money. And the funny thing, still on the books today, and it's in Alabama, and I don't know why, is the Raby Wireless Transmission Company. I don't know why it's Alabama. I have no idea.
Probably regulation.
Might have been, but it's still there, and it was renewed in the 60s. And I'm like, he died in 1950. What is this? I've still been trying to figure this out. So basically, he was doing all this crazy stuff, and he had this power plant, and he was tax assessor. He also worked on yachts, so he had the Raby Electric Machine Works, and he had his own machine shop, and it was down on the yacht basin. And people used to bring yachts there from all over the world to have them fixed. So he worked on that. He built all kinds of stuff. And then I found a picture of my grandfather with at the time was somebody it was I didn't know who it was, and because he was a younger man in the pictures, and only through AI was I able to figure out who it was. And I did this about 3 months ago. I stuck that photo in three different AIs, and I said, "My grandfather, C.J. Raby, is the man on the right. The man on the left holding the fish is unknown. Who is this man?" And it came back all three times and said, "This is Henry Ford."
Dude.
Three times. So I've got a picture of my grandfather in a boat that he built the engine for, that Raby oscillating gasoline engine, and
Yeah.
invented it at the cult. He's in that boat with Ford. So then I find more references to a guy named Ole Evinrude. Okay, he invented the outboard drive system,
OMC
but
Johnson Evinrude. Yeah.
that's right. But he didn't invent the engine for it. So I'm on the trail of thinking that my grandfather was trying to sell Evinrude these engines that he created because they were capable of 30,000 RPM way back in like 1912. And I even found a for sale ad in the newspaper of Fort Myers for the Raby family speedboat, and it says good for 12 miles per hour. Come see CJ at the dock if you want to buy it for like $50, which is a
Wow.
lot of money
Right.
at
Back.
that time.
Right.
But that was a speedboat to go 12 miles an hour back then. So all of that crazy stuff. And then, you've got his brothers that are still in Ohio, and every now and then he would write a letter home. So one of the most interesting letters that he wrote home was he said, "I'm not going to leave to come home until the airship flies." And he had the most beautiful handwriting. The people in that Victorian era, their handwriting was just art, right? You know what I mean? Like we
I
can't write
do.
that way today.
No, I'm in too much of a hurry all the time to
Yeah,
write like that.
handwriting was just it was art. So I'm reading this and I'm like, the airship, what the hell is he talking about? And then I was like, okay, well he knew the Wright brothers, but never been able to tie anything together with them there, other than when they were testing the kite that had flight controls on it. There was some mention of him with that. But I've never been able to find it again. I found it one time, and I don't know where the hell I read it at, and I've lost it. But that was happening around 1899 to 1900 in Chicago. They were there because it was so windy. Testing things out with a kite that had flight controls on it. But I've never found anything else about them and him. I was like, what's up with this airship thing? So then I find a letter. My cousin Maggie had it, and it said, "I'm acting as an aviation electrician at Door Field in Florida." And this was like October of 1916. So I go look, and I'll be damned if what wasn't being built in October of 1916 at Door Field was the Kettering Bug. And the Kettering Bug was the first cruise missile. So the way it worked is it had a piston engine on it, and they would calculate and say, okay, it's going to take X amount of engine revolutions of the propeller for this thing to fly 5 miles or whatever. And they would set a pin that was mechanically wound, and it would wind itself into the crankshaft. So when this pin got wound close enough to the crankshaft, it would stop the propeller, and it falls out of the sky and blows up. That's the Kettering Bug. So even though he didn't call it out, obviously he couldn't call it out. There was OPSEC. He couldn't call that out. This was obviously classified stuff for World War One. He just said that I'm acting as an aviation electrician, and Kettering just happened to be there. And that was the only thing going on at this place in 1916 at that time. So, I mean, who was an aviation electrician in 1916? You know what I mean?
I'm blown away, man. I mean,
So,
these are
so
some
what?
big names.
What's even more interesting is if you go, there's a 1930 article in the Fort Myers News Press talking about things that Henry Ford saw when he visited Estero Island, the cult, basically.
Wow.
And that was at a much earlier time, but it didn't say when. And it said Ford had an early interest in aviation, and it said while he was visiting the the electrical power plant at the Koreshan Unity site, he saw a helicopter airplane being built by a local enthusiast. Now, this is I mean, that article was written in 1930, and who knows what date he actually visited there, you see. So I don't know. The mention of the airship could have been that. It could have been the Kettering bug. It could have been something to do with the Wright brothers. But who's talking about an airship and saying I can't come home till it flies,
These are
right? And I got that letter. Um, so it's very mysterious. And every time there's a new update with newspapers.com, I go crazy trying to search my grandfather's name and put it with like wireless telegraph, or put it with invention or gasoline engine, um, or any of that sort of thing. There's a lot of stuff out there that pops up every time. So that was a little bit of that side of it. Now let's talk about the George Kingston side of it.
I was I
So,
I'm not even joking. I'm right here right now, and I've got this question highlighted. I say, all right, let's talk Kingston because it's like literally timeline right where I'm at. So your grandfather worked with George Kingston, who we
well,
all
and the first thing I'll say, like in the beginning of the podcast, you said my grandfather worked for people. He actually, I don't have any history of him working for anyone.
okay.
I think he was so out there, he didn't work for anybody. He was on his own,
He
on his
worked.
plate. I
Yeah,
think I got that from him because I've never had a job other than when I was just a kid working at that import shop. I don't know what it's like to get a paycheck I don't sign myself on the front side. So I just don't, I don't
sure.
understand what it's like to be an employee. I don't think he did either.
Okay. I
So he
don't
was
doubt it.
always collaborating and working with people because,
Right.
from what I can tell, he was a very colorful character, and he did things that were probably way out there that employers wouldn't like. But I found
Sure.
that newspaper article, because again, when you traveled anywhere or did anything, it would say so and so traveled so and so. So that article that I sent you a copy of said, CJ Raby of the Raby Electric and Power Company is going to be traveling to Kokomo, Indiana, where will be the guest of Mr. George Kingston for an extended amount of time of 6 weeks, working with a Kingston carburetor. So I love carburetors, always have, and that's obviously in my blood. But Kingston had the contract with Ford to provide carburetors for every Model T in Kokomo, Indiana. My grandfather worked with him there for 6 weeks. I don't know what that was about, but who knows? It could have been something they were testing some carburetor for that Kettering bug because that was around that time. They probably needed some sort of special updraft carb that could stand altitude. Something like that, I would think. Maybe they needed adjustability. Maybe they were afraid it wasn't going to be stable and the thing might flip upside down, so they had to have anti-gravity type things in it. I don't know. But there's a lot of reasons why he could have been there. But that's a crazy element to know that he was working, with the guy that provided every carburetor to Ford during that era.
I mean, just even the names like Ford that I'm hearing is just it's so crazy. So cool though. Such a cool connection piece to the world as we know it. Broad.
Well, and you see him being the tax assessor in Lee County, where Ford and Edison had their winter estates, and I think Firestone did too, or maybe he would stay with one of them. But all of those guys were there. They were all together. They had to go, hunting and camping
I'm
together.
about to say they
So
probably they probably went to the hunting land together and
exactly. But
yeah.
think about it. I mean, he was supposed to be assessing taxes on all their stuff. He was the man. So there was probably a little bit of hobnobbing going on there, like, hey, give us a deal on our taxes. And he got in trouble for some of that stuff. Like there was a fight broke out in a meeting and all kinds of stuff that was in the Fort Myers news press about it.
Wow.
Um, but I'm sure he was doing some stuff that was questionable just to get leverage with those guys. But when you're assessing taxes on Henry Ford and Edison, you
Wow.
know, I'm sure he had to go count all their stuff and look at what was there, you
Wow.
know, and I'm sure that's how he met them. But there, in the beginning, there was an Edison generator that was part of this thing at the Gresham place. It's not an Edison generator; it's on there now. Um, so yeah, it's just it's pretty crazy stuff. It really is.
It's so
and
cool though.
and I don't know all of it. I mean, I know pieces of it. I wish my dad could have told me stuff, but he never did. It's like he was ashamed of it. So now let me take you down a real interesting rabbit hole. Okay,
All right.
so when my grandfather, and he was still doing stuff on the railroad, like you'd see something where he was on the railroad traveling somewhere doing being a telegraph operator, or he was working at the St. John's River at the yacht stuff up there in Jacksonville, all kinds of stuff. You're constantly looking at a timeline about where he was at and what he was doing. But when the Unity fell apart, it's because this Teed guy who was supposed to be immortal died. Okay. And they thought he was going to come back, like a resurrection type thing, but he didn't. And then the buzzards came, and then they, basically they put him in this thing, and it got washed out to sea in a storm, and he never came back. And they all of a sudden started figuring out, hey, we've been taken, we've been lied to. This guy wasn't immortal. This is a bunch of BS, right? So it fell apart, and my grandfather left it around 1920, 1921, it seems like. Okay. Then he was on the Atlantic Coastline Railroad, which goes through Georgia, through Waycross, Georgia, and he meets my grandmother. He is, well, we could do the math on it. Let's just say that when he married my grandmother, he was 56 and she was 13.
Whoa.
And she was a full-blooded Cherokee. A lot of Indians,
Whoa.
lot of Indians around that Waycross area, right?
Okay.
So he, yeah,
Whoa, dude.
so they get married, start having some kids. So my uncle Ralph I'm sorry, my uncle Bill was the oldest,
There's the
and
age gap that you were pointing out earlier.
exactly.
Yeah.
So he was 57 basically before he started a family at all, because he had been lied to and thought this celibate thing and all this was the way life needed to be. And he gets out of there and he's like, I'm screwed. I got to go find this young girl or whatever and start a family. And that's what he did. And he was
Wow.
still tax assessor. So he ended up, marrying her. They have some kids. My dad was I think my dad was the youngest. There might have been one younger. There was three boys and a girl. And so this is where it gets really crazy. So my brother, well, sorry, my uncle, Bill, he was drafted in World War II. He was older than my dad. So he got drafted. He was a big, strong guy, and they made him the guy on an aircraft carrier that went in and pulled the pilot out if the plane crashed on the flight deck, right?
Okay.
So he's
Crazy.
doing this, and it's a dangerous job to have, obviously, and he was in the Pacific. Well, a kamikaze hit the boat and it killed a bunch of people. And I've actually found reference to this, and I've got pictures of this.
Wow.
And so it was the U.S. I think USS Bonhomme Richard was the name of the boat. There's a newer version of that now. There's been several of those, but the one in World War II, I found where it was hit by a kamikaze. So basically, this plane, and at that time, that might not even been a carrier, but he was on this boat for whatever reason. So imagine my grandmother is like 1942, something like that, maybe 43. A staff car pulls up in the front yard. Okay. Somebody gets out of it. They come to the house for the telegram. Your son's been killed in combat. KIA. So she's a Cherokee Indian, so she starts drinking. Cherokees can't drink, right? So she kind of Indians is firewater, right? So she starts drinking. She kind of loses her mind, but she comes back around after a while, and she thinks everything's okay. She went to the loony bin for a little while and came back out of it. And my aunt, who just died a few years ago, told me this face to face, and my wife, this whole story, and she was there. So my aunt, which would be the wife of the person was KIA, was there when the telegram got delivered. So her husband also was killed, right? It was my grandmother's son, and it was her husband. So she's there, she sees this. Well, then think maybe a year goes by. All of a sudden, somebody shows up at the door. Knocks on the door. She doesn't know who this person is. She's kind of out of the loony bin. She's okay. She goes there and sees this person. She don't know who they are until they open their mouth and she hears their voice. And it's my uncle, and he's not dead. So dog tags got mixed up. So the person that was KIA, their family said that they were injured in action, but the person that was injured in action got the dog tag sent home that said they were KIA. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he got burned really bad and was messed up from this. And she didn't really know who he was. He was still bandaged up and stuff. So she thinks she's talking to a ghost at this point.
Oh my.
All right. So she completely loses her mind and goes and jumps in the river and tries to kill herself. Okay. So she died in Chattahoochee, Florida at the Florida State Mental Hospital. And I've got the note where she passed away as a inmate in the Florida State Mental Institution because she lost her mind because of this.
Oh, whoa. Whoa.
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah, man, I wasn't expecting to go down that road for any of this. I mean, I told him this was going to be a banger this episode. Something else that I wanted to touch on that you did touch on before was, and I hope I say it right, but is it the Potentia phone?
Yeah, the Raby wireless Potentia phone. So basically, what it did, it would take one telegraphic input that was with a wire,
Okay.
and it would distribute that to four channels of 25 outputs each. That would then go wireless to up to 100 receiving stations. And that was what he did before anybody else. And so the military wanted it. A lot of people wanted it. Um, I ultimately don't know what happened to it. All I know is I've got all those things that were in the newspaper from Tampa, the Tampa Tribune, Fort Myers News Press, all that, where it was a huge invention, and all these people wanted it, and General MacArthur talked about it, and all this crazy stuff. Which MacArthur talked about it later on, obviously. This was like 1910, but they were talking about MacArthur talking about something that was invented at that time that could be used on ships that never had been. That's where that came into play in World War II. But there's still a lot out there about it. But the Raby wireless Potentia phone.
And growing up, all the way through, you're even saying up through maybe even 5, 10 years ago, you're still learning a lot of this stuff, right?
I'm learning it today. I've learned stuff last week. I found pictures
I mean,
2 weeks ago that I'd never seen before. Um,
it's so
you know,
crazy to see what shaped of your life as an inventor and as an engineer, so to speak,
well,
uh,
what's funny is I wanted
without
to.
even knowing.
Well, this is the reason why life is so intuitive. I wanted to be an inventor before I knew my grandfather was an inventor, right? You know
Like,
what I'm saying? Like it was
that's like
that was
so
my goal. I mean
that's so
that
bizarre.
literally some people are like I want to get a degree in this. No, I want to invent something. I want to invent something that makes a difference, right? I want to have a novel concept. I want to have this idea that works out in practical use. And that was my goal. And then when I actually had that invention, I wasn't even trying to have an invention. It wasn't my goal. Like I happened upon it, it was a good idea. And then every invention that I've had since then, I've kind of been trying to have, right? But that one, the first one was like, I looked at it and it was a good idea. It made sense and it beat the factory. And I'm like, let's get rid of this ball bearing and put a plain bearing there. That just makes sense. But it was a novel concept. And it was a novel concept that, gave me U.S. patent 8992089. And then all the other ones have come, past that. But yeah, I mean, it's very odd how this stuff is totally in your blood. It's in your DNA.
Right.
And people, we talked about this a little bit last time. I truly believe either you've got this or you don't. Um, I saw a podcast with on Joe Rogan the other day when
Hmm.
Billy Bob Thornton was on there. He was talking about acting, right? And he's like, "Look, either you got it or you don't." He said, "I've got it," and he goes, "I can go out he's like, somebody gives me a line and says, go do this, I can go do it. It's in my DNA. It's what I can do. There's people that have gone to school and done all these classes and all this stuff. He's like, I have not done that. I get it naturally.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
just, it's like athleticism too, right? Either you've got it or you don't. Like, I can't catch a football, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not good at any of that. But people that are usually good at that are really not good at a lot of other stuff. You know what I mean? So I truly think that each of us have been given that set of God gifts, and you just have to explore enough to find what yours is, you know?
Yeah, find what you're not just passionate about, but what you're actually good at too.
Yeah. And I found that early on, you know,
Yeah,
just, and
amazing.
that was, I mean, when I was a kid, my dad knew that I had this gene, right? And it skipped my dad completely. Like, I mean, he could change spark plugs, he could work on a carburetor. That's about it. I mean, he didn't understand the four strokes of a four-stroke engine. He didn't know about compression. He didn't know any of that. He was a banker, right?
Right, right.
Um, but he taught,
Again, interesting though.
but he taught, but it just skipped right over him. Now, my brother,
Was
he's
that by
also,
choice though?
I don't think so. I just don't think it ever really appealed to him.
Okay.
I don't remember my dad. He didn't build anything. I can't remember my dad really driving a nail. I mean, I just don't. It was just never creation and building and engineering. It just wasn't his thing. He
Yeah,
knew
man.
how to make money. He knew how to buy and sell and trade. He knew how to do business.
Important.
You
Yeah,
know,
important stuff.
but I mean, he had a bank built for him before he was even 30 years old. Because of what he was able to do. So I think that's a trait with rabies is whatever we do, we freaking go all in. We're all in all the way, you know. Um,
So I got a question about your grandfather, and this can be kind of, off the cuff, but this is a VW lifestyle podcast, right?
mhm.
What would your grandfather, you think, say about the VW community today?
I think the thing he would appreciate about it is because everybody that owns a Volkswagen is always they're handy with a car. You know what I mean? Like they're going to work on it. I mean, with a Volkswagen, you have to be that way. To be honest with you, you just have to be.
They were
You know,
engineered for the right for people to be able to work on them.
that's right. They were, and that's why a good example. Go back to a Ford tractor. Okay, I've got a 1949 8N Ford. There's no two bolts on that tractor that have the same head on both sides. Like a bolt and a nut doesn't have the same size head on both sides. You know why? Because they gave you one set of tools with the tractor. So if it had two 9/16 and a 9/16 on the head, 9/16 on the nut, how are you going to hold it? You only got one wrench. So it's 9/16 on one side, 5/8 on the other. You see? So
Yeah.
so ultimately, and I've got a 1944 Kubelwagen, and a lot of stuff on it is made that way because it's made to be worked on while you're being shot at, right? And mine's got an extensive history behind it. Mine was delivered to the front lines in Poland and 3 weeks before D-Day, and it's a crazy story. It was delivered to the Second SS Panzer Division. But at any rate, I think my grandfather would like the thriftiness of Volkswagen people. He would like the fact that the cars are utilitarian. He would like all that, And I mean, he died in 1950, so he might have seen one. I doubt he did, but he might have. Um, but yeah, I think everything he did was very practical that way as well. Volkswagens are very practical vehicles. And something about that, everybody's like, well, these Volkswagen engineers, they did this way and that way. And something that everybody has to be reminded of when these cars were new, this was basically their version of a Kia. It's the cheapest thing out there, right? So while it might have been super engineered, it also had to be cheap. So there was certain things that these cars didn't get because it was too expensive. Or there's certain things that a Porsche got that these engines didn't get. So sometimes people are like, well, the VW engineers did it that way. And I'm like, yeah, but they also had a budget. You know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah.
that always plays into it.
So I've got a like maybe a fan question, you know,
Okay.
like a community driven question. And I wanted to put this question in here because I want to hear your answer regardless of how long or short that it is. But Why are Raby engines so durable?
Well, I think because I never cared about how much money I made. I still don't. I don't know how much money's in the bank. I don't care. I just know that it's not enough, and I know that if I build everything as good as I can, I save as much as I can, and I make as much as I can, I'm going to be as successful as I possibly can. That's all you can do. Make as much as you can, save as much as you can, and do the best job you can do. That's it. That's the three things. You can't do more than that. So I think the durability comes from the fact that I've never told an employee, nor have I told myself, hurry up. I've never said that. I had an employee retire here after 28 years back in April, and he'll tell you, I never told him to hurry up. I never had him clock in on a job. I never cared. If something took a day or two longer, I didn't care. The way I looked at it was, if that job went a day or two over, then the next job we do might be a day or two shorter because things go smoother. It all works out in the end. The durability also comes from unwavering standards and ruthless and rigid adherence to standards. Basically, meaning that this is the way this is going to be. I'm not going to waver on this. It's so rigid that I'm not going to let it slide. It's either right or it's wrong. There is no in between. So things, I think what you really leads people to have failures a lot of times, I think, especially in today's world with these engines, is they're wanting to know how fast it can get done, right? And I've seen people, and we have, as a society, we have confused speed with proficiency. We believe that, as a whole, that you are better at your craft if you can do the job faster, right? So people ask me, how quick can you put one of those together? I want to slap them. I'm like, if I find myself in a rhythm, I'm stopping because I don't trust what I'm about to do. That's probably comes from the aviation background that I've got, working with helicopters and stuff, that you kind of get in that where you can't remember torque specs. You're supposed to go look everything up because it might have changed since the last time you did the job.
Yeah.
I've always treated cars like they had wings. But I truly think that we have confused that proficiency with speed, and we're only graded on how quick we can do something. And I think the reason for that is because quickness is associated with profitability. And that goes like in most car shops today. Can't really do it with Volkswagens. But let's say if you've got a Kia and you take it down to get it worked on, the shop's going to charge you book time, right? And it's like, okay, to change this water pump, the book says it's a 4-hour job. Well, if you've done that job a lot, you can do it in 2 hours. The customer gets charged for 4 hours. You did it in 2. You get paid for 4 hours, even though you only work for 2. That is a screwed up system. It breeds negligence, right? But I think that's got a lot to do with this. They call it flat rate. It's the way people charge for work. And I truly think that is a major problem that leads to things not being durable, you know? And you can even look at Volkswagens over time, and you will see that the earlier cars were built better than the later ones, right? Porsche is the same way. You can look at the water-cooled Porsches, especially. In the earlier cars, like when the 996s, the build quality of them were so much better. You look, they start learning they can make money if they start skimping on things. So the first ones are actually overbuilt because they don't know what they can get away with, you know?
Wow, man. I
So,
mean,
but I
profound
mean,
thought even in itself. And I'm very familiar, by the way, with flat rate because of what I do for work. You know,
mhm.
obviously, um, I train contractors, and this is a conversation that I have all the time. Usually on the flip side of it, though,
Yeah.
it's teaching technicians how to sell flat rate. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
really
But
interesting to hear this concept, you
well,
know.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, it's not about how quick you get it done. It's about if you got to do it twice or not. And the thing is also about durability. I know what flies and what don't. Like, I'm on that dyno, and for these air cooled engines, I still have my old analog Stuska dyno I've had since the age of 24, and I refuse to completely update it. It's got telemetry on it and stuff, but I want a manual throttle and I want a manual load valve. And the reason why, I can read that engine from feedback. I've dynoed thousands of hours with this thing. and I can feel if it's about to come apart. I can feel if it's running lean. I can feel if it's running rich. I know from the tactile feedback coming through those controls exactly what it's supposed to feel like. A good example, my load valve. Okay, I wore the thing out and it got so slick I could barely grab it, right? And if my hands got sweaty, I would slip on it. So I bought a new one from Harvey Stuska years and years ago, and I had it in my drawer. And I never installed it. But then I did install it. I put it on there. I took it off after one dyno, one motor. I took it off. I was like, I got to have the old one because it don't feel right. So I mean, I'm that glued into this. I don't care what the data is telling me. People are looking at dyno graphs. I don't care about that. I want that feedback. I know exactly the way it's supposed to respond to the throttle, the way it's supposed to respond to the load. I know the vibration in the floor, if I balanced it well enough or not. I can tell how it responds to throttle inputs versus load inputs. I know certain engine combinations should make X amount of torque at X amount of RPM. I know if I put a certain exhaust on the thing and the motor leans out, that it wants more. If it richens up, it wants less. It's all the stuff that we have learned from doing this over and over again, and not just doing it, but paying attention every single time and taking mental notes. I don't take notes on paper. Everything's here, every bit of it. I remember all of it. But the durability, it comes from that rigid and ruthless adherence to standards and not letting things fly. And I mean, today I have people contact me, this engine was built by you 20 years ago. And they think that's an achievement, right? They're like, this thing's lasted 20 years. I'm like, that's all? That's not an achievement, right? To most Volkswagen people, for an engine to last 5 years is an accomplishment. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, sometimes you look at it and it's like it's been rebuilt 10 times in 5 years. But when I see one like that, and every now and then somebody buys one and it's been sitting for years or whatever, they bring it back to life. Sometimes you find one that I built years ago and the car never got finished because somebody got sick or something. And I've opened up one of those that had been in the crate for 15 years and it was like a time capsule. Nobody had ever done anything with it. Wow. But I learned a lot from that thing because I had dynoed it way back, back then on old fuel, the old gas we used to have before all this ethanol stuff. I took it out of the crate and ran it on fresh gas. I still had the dyno graph from before. I learned so much about jetting and everything because over time the fuel changes and you just acclimate to it. And, used to jets that I used to have where that engine wanted like a 135 main jet. I put our modern fuel in it today and it wouldn't even run at wide open throttle with a 135 main. I had to go to a 150. So you learn how much the fuel's actually changed by having that old motor that's been in that crate with a dyno graph and a full set of specs. It hasn't been touched as a control standard,
Wow. Blown away.
But all of that stuff leads to durability. Every bit of it does. Because I never focused on horsepower. I never did because, horsepower is one of those things where it only matters in a 500 RPM window, right? When people look at a dyno graph, if I hand them a dyno graph and I watch their eyes go to peak power, I'm like, I give up. This guy doesn't understand. If I hand them a dyno graph and I watch them look at the very middle of that piece of paper and they're looking at the torque curve and they're looking at the brake-specific fuel consumption and they're looking at that being a mirror image of the torque curve, this guy understands a dyno graph, right? This guy understands that horsepower is a derivative of torque, and therefore torque is always superior. So that to me is something that I kind of grade people with. But horsepower only matters because you're up there at, at the top 500 RPM of the engine power band. Most of these engines I build for people, they're making 190, 200, 220 horsepower, whatever. The one I'm working on now with my billet heads will be about 280, 290, normally aspirated at 9.5 to 1 compression, very mild with a roller cam in it that I've come up with. But even with those, the guy's going to get on it a couple of times, scare himself so bad, and realize the car is not made for this. At that point in time, he's just going to brag about the horsepower that he's got, and he's going to use that 3,000 to 5,000 RPM range from then on. That's all he needs. So that's why I've always tried to put the power from 2,500 to $5,000. That's where I want everything to be made, right? Wow. That always stumps things in the top end, so your horsepower numbers are not as impressive. But guess what your numbers are that are impressive? Your durability numbers and your longevity numbers. Because you've built an engine that's making all its power and is very efficient in a range where it's going to be operated at.
Good stuff, man. All right. Let's touch on the fourth dimension.
Yeah, so you're talking about podcasts. So I was an early podcaster before podcasts were a thing, which I guess it was a thing because it came across because of the iPod. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I mean, so when I was first started doing podcasts, it was Fourth Dimension Radio around 2006, and I did that '06 to about 2010. Um, my dad passed away in '09, and I know I did a couple after he passed away. And really, when I'd been getting really deeper into the water cooled Porsche thing, all the bearings and stuff I was doing, and there for about a 5 year period, I stepped away from doing almost anything with Volkswagen stuff, air cooled wise. Not that I didn't miss it because I really did. And today I'm back in it really hot and heavy. Most everything I got on the board over here that I am doing myself is all air cooled. But I was gone for a while. But yeah, the Fourth Dimension podcast, I had several sponsors. And when it first came out, and we were top 10 on iTunes and downloads a couple of times. We were top 100 a lot of times.
That is
Um,
so cool.
and I would sometimes it was just me. Sometimes I would have a guest. You know, I would interview somebody that had a car or, interview somebody else in the industry, kind of like what you're doing a little bit. Um, it was more technical though. It was almost all technical stuff. I really didn't care that much about the story. I was all about the how you did it. So
Yeah, yeah. Just mechanical mind. Not that relationships and etc. is not important, just different mind. I don't have a mechanical mind, not even a little bit. I, and may come as a surprise, may not. I could care less how things work. There's people out there a lot smarter than me that know just how it goes, and great. I'm the guy that has to pay for that type of behavior, and that's okay with me, man. I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, and it's okay. It's really not even something that I feel I would try to get good at. Like I went to school for HVAC, so I understand refrigeration. I'm not like a total moron, but again, let's go back to the want. I don't want to. I don't
yeah,
I didn't want to work in the field in HVAC. So you know what? I didn't. I was in the field for a little under 2 years. I took a leadership role, management spot as a sales manager, and that's it. I got my rank at the desk. You know, the company made millions of dollars in sales, and I was a huge, asset to them. I didn't have to go install them or fix them. Again, it's that want. I didn't really want to. But again, that's not this ain't me. You had mentioned something else earlier too. Was it Rencast?
yeah. So we still do that. So the it's mostly water cooled Porsche stuff, but I have posted some air cooled Porsche on there before, Type 4 stuff. Um, so Rencast, RENN, German word for speed. That's on YouTube. Also, I think you can get it on the old iTunes. It's gone away now. I think it's on Spotify, some things like that. And then also Ren Vision, which there's a channel on YouTube, Ren Vision, and a lot of the Ren cast are on there. But again, it's mostly focused on the water cooled side of things, because that's where the focus has been. There's hundreds of thousands of those cars. I'm doing more with air cooled stuff again because I kind of got bored with the water cooled stuff, you know? It's one of those things where when I first started it, there was nobody else doing it, and the engines were very misunderstood. The factory didn't even share torque specs, about things. There was no specifications shared. We had to figure everything out on our own. In the early days, I had to put Chevy parts in the things and make a lot of stuff. Today, it's just kind of become too mainstream. Too many other people have jumped in. People say they can put one together in 4 hours and all this stuff, and it's kind of lost its mystique with me because I've done so much with it. But I have recreated my own version of that engine for the fifth time. This is what I call my Gen 5 engine, and it's actually ready to be sold now. Where I take those cars from, like a 3.4 liter engine to a 4.3 or 4.4, or even larger than that. Take something that made 250 horsepower and it makes, 425 to 450. And still stays normally aspirated, still stays simple. But it kind of got too easy. Like, I mean, it was almost too simple. The factory left a lot of low hanging fruit, as we like to say,
Yeah.
because they put more in those engines than they were getting out of them at the time, so they could make more power every year or two by just changing a head or changing a cam or changing this or changing that. They could make an extra 15 or 20 horsepower. And then they phased the engines out before they ended up maximizing it. So we just kind of picked up where they left off and made them, bigger, better, stronger. Sometimes not even bigger, but just better and stronger. But now, I'm the last 3 or 4 years, I've been way more back into the air cooled stuff, having got my whole CNC shop up here. What I really like about air cooled engines, well, there's one thing I really like about them, one thing I really dislike about them. What I really like about them is that it's simple enough that I can make almost every part other than gaskets and seals myself if I need to. I'm making connecting rods now downstairs. So I can do that because the engine's simple enough that I've got basically full control over my quality. What I dislike about those engines is how far and how bad the industry has degraded as a whole. Um, I look at these people that are in the industry that once were leaders who are all at each other's throats. It's a very cutthroat thing now. Everybody's copying each other, and it's like the race to the bottom on steroids. And I can see these things because I'm an outcast. I'm the guy that's over here on the other coast that's looking into what's going on. And I see all these parts that are made overseas getting backdoored by different people. And the thing I'll say, I don't like to use Chinese parts because I'm a proud American. I'm a Marine. And I want my engine to be characterized by it being comprised of American made stuff that I'm putting together downstairs out of things I'm machining in the room right next to where I'm building it at. Literally. And that's what I want. But that comes with a price, meaning that I can't do very many, and they come with a steep price tag. And a lot of times people look down on that. And they look down on the steep price tag simply, usually because they can't see the value in it. And the reason they can't see the value in it is because everything else is so cheap. And they can't believe that mine is 10 times more money than what the other one is, even though they're the same size. But the difference is how it's comprised and what's put into it. And the level of standards that you have when you're doing it. Did somebody put this thing together while they were watching a clock, or did somebody not even have a clock in their workshop? Like here, there's
Yeah.
not a clock here. I mean, they're just not. I mean, that's the only way I can be. So that's what I see in the air cooled world now. It's being out of it for about that 5 or 8, really 10-year period. When I came back into it, I was kind of shocked about a lot of what I saw, but I never completely left. Like, I was still attached and I still built these engines. There just wasn't that many of them. And today, my biggest purchasers are guys that have Porsche 356s and 912s. And the reason why, they appreciate what is created at this upper echelon, and they want something that can go in their car and not require cutting of the car and give them 150, 200 horsepower on a bad day. And, that's what I created. It took me 30 years to create that as a bolt-in solution. And when it costs them $30,000, $40,000 to rebuild their stock 1600 or 1500 Porsche engine, well, they can take that thing out of the car, pickle it, put it on a shelf. I don't need a single part off of it, and they can plug my engine in there at a weekend. That's a huge value. So I think those people have a bigger value in what I create today than people that have a Beetle or a bus. Although half of my work is for Beetles and buses. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just it's a different world than it used to be. I'll say when I first put my first Beetle together, I ordered every part from J.C. Whitney. You know what I mean? So
Wow. I haven't heard that name in a little while.
Oh, I know, but
That's like Crutchfield for stereo stuff.
yeah, same thing.
Yeah. I got some rapid fire questions.
All right.
These are questions that would typically demand a fast response. If a story comes out of them, cool. If not, I'm cool with just a fast response. I didn't do these the first time around because I already knew that there was going to be number two, uh,
Mm-hmm.
meaning this episode number two or part two to our episode. But all right, rapid fire questions. You ready?
Born ready.
All right, good answer. Most underrated engineer in history.
And I didn't look at these first. So
That's all right.
underrated engineer. I think Rudolph Diesel.
Okay. You want to go into why, or do you want to just
Well,
stick to the name?
not a lot of people realize who he was. They don't know where the name diesel engine came from. They just don't. So I think it's not he's just unrecognized, I think.
Super cool. Cool answer. All right, how about this one? Worst piece of engineering that was ever widely adopted.
Mm. uh Porsche intermediate shaft bearing.
Touche, my friend.
Yeah, that was, I mean, that's what I invented the fix for. So
That's
I
right.
think that's fitting.
Yeah, me too. All right, Edison or Tesla?
That's a tough one because I've got a Tesla. Um, I mean, and I love that car. Not because it's electric. I could give a damn less if it's electric. I just love the technology. It's just the things that car does is crazy. I love it. I love it for what it is. Um, I mean, I have to say Edison because I've studied him so much, and that whole there's so much back and forth about who copied who and who did who first and whatever. I think that they were just as different as they were the same, and each one of them had to have their thing about DC or AC. One's not safe, one's safe. I mean, you know, back and forth. I have to say Edison just because my grandfather was personal friends with him. So,
Cool. I'll take that. That's why I put that in there. How about this one? One invention that you wish you would have created.
and there's a bunch, honestly. There's a whole bunch. Um,
First one that comes to mind, then.
I'm trying to think, man. If if it wasn't on a podcast, I could answer it right away. Um,
Take
I
your
was thinking about this one the other day, and it was, and this is kind of a crazy one, but I had worked on an invention for a collapsible porta potty, and I almost got the patent on it. Um, because think about when porta potties are being stored, um, they take up a lot of space. When they're being hauled, they take up a lot of space. So I came up with one that collapses. The roof goes all the way down on top of the tank. So instead of it being 7 feet tall, it's 3.5 feet tall.
yeah.
And the wind don't blow them around. If you're on a construction site, you can collapse the thing and all that. But a guy beat me to it because he made it fold up, and mine wasn't as it was still the same type of novel concept where you're changing the footprint of it by folding it up. So I would have to say I wish I would have invented that first, because I would have been able to source a patent on it. But his folding up got in the way of mine collapsing, and it was going to be way too much of a fight because the novel concept was basically the same, even though the product is radically different.
Yeah.
So yeah, porta potty, that would be it. The
Okay.
collapsible porta potty.
Cool. Cool. For sure. For sure. Um, all right. How about this one? Biggest engineering pet peeve.
Whatever makes something get put together in a substandard fashion, you know, um, the things that don't make sense.
That
I think
that time we were talking about earlier. Speed.
exactly the time, but today I think the problem we have with engineered things is engineers today did not grow up on a farm. If you look at things that were developed in the 70s, 80s, 60s, even the 90s, a lot of those engineers grew up on farms. They just did. They learned how to work on things. They were practical rather than just purely analytical. Today, to be an engineer means you're good in math and you're good in CAD. That's all you have to be. I mean, ultimately. So you don't have to have practical experience. So I think a lot of the things we see being invented today, and being created, they don't make sense from a practical perspective. And sometimes they don't make sense from a practical perspective because the accountants weighed in, like I was talking about earlier, right? So sometimes the accounting department is in charge of the engineering department. That's a problem. So I think that would be my biggest pet peeve is when the engineering department answers to the accounting department. Um, but that makes no sense. But that's what happens, and it happens in every world of manufacturing. That's why today,
It's
look at
business.
Toyota. Look at all these hundreds of thousands of engines being recalled. There's no reason for that. The stuff is not being tested, and it's being engineered by people who really don't rate being an engineer. They if you said, okay, you engineered this, now work on it, they couldn't do it, right? So I think that's what makes what I do really outside the box, because I can take something like I can go grab this Sharpie and I can write something down really quickly. I can go downstairs. I can throw it on the lathe. I can kind of make a prototype. Then I go model it. So I don't go straight into modeling software. I go kind of whip up a prototype and make it on a manual machine first. Then, once I've kind of made it fit, then I go model the thing. You know why? Because I'm not good at modeling. I can do it. It's not my thing. I taught myself that when I was in my 40s. And it was because I really wanted to do it. And 3D printing started a lot of that. That's what got me into the modeling. And then that's what got me into, machining. And that's how I taught myself 5-axis machining in less than a year, with nobody showing me. But ultimately, I mean, it's one of those things where I can take that idea, I can create a concept from it, I can make a prototype from it, I can then put that prototype on an engine, I can see it run, I can break it, I can redo it, and I keep on until I get it right. And I do that all inside one building, and usually without any help. And I don't get help because I want it to be mine, and because if I try to explain it to somebody that's helping me, all it does is confuse them because they can't understand what I'm doing. So that slows me down. So a lot of times I'll have an employee and he's like, "What the hell is he doing?" And then next thing you know, I walk by with a part. And he's like, "Oh, I get it now." But that's just what I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a huge pet peeve is engineers that are analytical and not practical enough. And I think that is responsible for a lot. But I tell you, the engineers that really impress me, the ones that impress me more than anybody, are the people who package things today. Like furniture packaging, or you get something that you need to get put together, and they've got that down to a science. I mean, I open it up and I'm like, this is impressive. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
They were
you
good at
packed
Tetris.
exactly. Yeah, this is awesome. I mean, that really impresses me.
Dude, I gotta tell you, a small confession. My wife is fantastic at that. If we, and we have several times, if we move or anything like that, I'm always like, honey, you stand back here and watch the guys load this truck, because she'll say, nope, that goes up there, turn that, now move that,
Yeah.
angle it this way and push it. And yeah, she's good like that.
My wife can do that too. And when we go on vacation, like I pack all my own clothes and she packs everything else. And you can tell, hey, yeah, Jake's a Marine. You know why? Because everything's rolled up. Because as Marines, we have to get ready to go on ships. So everything gets rolled up as tight as you can get it so you can stack it like firewood inside this little 18 by 18 cube, on a ship. So when I take all my pants, I roll them all up. I take all my shirts, I roll them all up, and they're all in a bag rolled up. So I'm ready
Crazy.
to deploy.
Yeah, you are. Deploy with the family unit.
Exactly.
All right, let's ask this question. This is an interesting one, but if you could go back to a time or a moment in your family's kind of innovation timeline, especially your grandfather, I guess which one would interest you the most?
Well, I would love to go back in time to both of my grandfathers, my on my dad's side and my mom's side. Of course, the one on my dad's side had all the crazy, cults and all that, and I would love to just kind of be able to look over his shoulder and see what he was doing. Um, on my mom's side, I would like to see just what kind of life a person lived that never learned to read and write, but made millions of dollars. Um, you know, um,
Super cool.
and he was just he was a chemist. He made moonshine, and he didn't do very many things that was legal. He never went to jail, though. He never got caught. But I would love to see that. I mean, and he he passed away, maybe about 15 years ago, but really probably 20 years ago now. So when I was a kid, I got to, be with him quite a bit. But on my mom's side, on my dad's side, obviously, he died 25 years before I was born.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I would love to go back and see what he was up to. I mean, just, be out in the woods with those guys, with Firestone and all those guys camping and, this crazy, cruise missile thing and,
Dude,
meeting George Kingston. I mean, it would be epic. But I mean, at the time, it probably wasn't a big deal to him. If you think about it, it was probably kind of normal to him because at the time, those people weren't really that legendary. You know
right.
what I mean?
They
A
weren't who
lot
they
of
were
people,
yet. They weren't
a
who they
lot of
became.
people, I mean, the thing is, a lot of people didn't even know who they were. They probably knew who Ford was, obviously.
Right.
But, I mean, some of these people, they weren't connected. You're talking to people that lived way back in the mountains and stuff. They didn't get a newspaper. They didn't know who these people are. It's not like today where, you know, everything comes across as a notification on your phone. So it would be kind of epic to see how it was back then when you're just standing there talking to Henry Ford, you're standing there talking to Edison, you know, or or
Mind
somehow
blown.
somehow you get a letter from Charles Kettering saying, "I want you to come work on a airship that's going to be a cruise missile." I mean, I'm like, how did they communicate? How did he find him? How did he know where he was at? You know what I mean? I just don't. He was states away. Kettering was still in Ohio, and
That's
he was
like
going
the
back and forth to Michigan.
that's where the bumper sticker "Great minds think alike" comes from, probably. And they meet somewhere where great minds think alike.
I guess it's not like there was trade shows.
Right.
I
No,
mean,
no, for
there
sure,
was no
man. What
PRI show. There was no
yeah.
SEMA show.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy, man. Crazy. What's one message for the next generation of innovators, of sculptors, of crafters, of I don't know, builders? What's some advice that you have for them? Maybe a young inventor or a young builder, next generation, looking to get into and have a shop and a machine shop and all the stuff like you've accomplished in your career. What's some advice that you would give to the next generation?
Uh, well, this is kind of twofold. So the big one is it comes from Dr. Portia, and it's a quote that says, "If you do what you believe is right rather than what is expected, there will be people who appreciate what you create and want to share it with you." And what that basically means is you do it your way. Um, don't immerse yourself in what other people are doing. Um, I don't give a damn what other people are doing. I don't sit around and watch YouTube videos. I don't watch what competitors are doing. I don't watch um, any of that stuff. I only care about my game and what I'm doing in my game. And that, I think, is the difference between being a leader and a follower. And today, I think in all these social circles, you get all this. I've got so many followers. I don't care about that. I want leaders following me. I want leaders who can see what one motivated, fire pissing individual can do um, by himself. And I did this without going to banks, and I did this without going to get loans, and I did this with money I brought home that I earned selling motors at the Pomona swap meet and parting out cars in Southern California and building motors in my barracks room. It was hard. It was a bitch. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, I want people to be leaders, and I want them to be in their own game. Um, the other thing would be what my senior drill instructor came up to me. Everybody, when you are presented your Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, and you become a Marine, either at San Diego or at Parris Island, which I'm a Parris Island Marine, and we're the best, by the way. Parris Island Marines always the best. That's what we always say. It's a big rivalry between what we call Hollywood Marines and Parris Island Marines. But when he came up to me and he put that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor in my hand, which is the hardest thing that you will pretty much ever do in your life, right? I mean, there's other things you can do. You can become a SEAL, you can go Delta Force, things like that. But as far as most people, about the hardest thing you can accomplish is getting that. And they would always tell us something. And I never really understood exactly what he meant by it, but he leaned down to me and he said, "Don't let the bastards take you down with them." And I think what he meant by that, and of course I wasn't going to say, "Sir, what did you mean by that?" But I think what he meant was, you did good while you were here. You were a good recruit. You're going to be a good Marine. You get out in the fleet, and there's going to be people around you that are not as good as you, and they may set a standard that's lower, and you may try to adhere to that lower standard because they're getting by with that. But don't let them do it to you, right? Because as a Marine, we're always taught there's that 10%. So there's 10% of the people that made it through boot camp that shouldn't have. There's 10% of those Marines are going to get other Marines killed in combat. There's always that 10%. And I look around in the civilian world, and it's really like 50%, right? But ultimately, that's what we're taught, that 10%. We need to identify that 10%, and that 10% shouldn't be here. But I think those are probably two big things. And either you can or you can't. Either way, you're right. If you put your mind to it and you're willing to work 20-hour days, right? And I mean, I'm 50 years old, and sometimes I still work 20-hour days. It's hard to do it now, but over the weekend, I mean, everybody's eating turkey, and after family went to bed, I'm back over here rocking, and I'm making stuff on a 5-axis machine till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Dang.
I used to leave the shop when I lived 50 yards away. I'd leave the shop, and there's roosters crowing, because I was in the country. You hear roosters crowing because it's time for everybody else to wake up. I'm just not going to bed, So, but yeah, that's what it's at. I mean, people always say, nothing good happens after midnight. To me, all the good stuff happens after midnight. So,
Oh, that's great. That's funny because my wife says that to my kids who are now just getting their driver's licenses and their cars, and they're always wanting to go places. Well, hey, we can go here and there. It's 10:30, 11. My wife always says nothing good happens after 10 p.m.
yeah.
So
That's just when I get started.
Right,
But it's
right.
not, I mean, I got to stop doing it because it's not as easy as it used to be, But a lot of times that's when there's nobody around, it's super quiet, and I can just focus on stuff, and that's, you got to get in the zone. And I talked about that in the first podcast, getting in the zone, and you got to stay in the zone,
I love it.
And that's a wrap for this episode of DubLife Diaries. Thanks for riding along with us and diving into these incredible stories of the people in the dubs that drive their dreams. If you love today's episode, don't forget to subscribe or hit that follow button so you never miss an adventure. Do you have a story to tell or know somebody else who's living the dub life? Awesome! Reach out to us. You can find us on all socials at DubLife Diaries, or shoot me an email. I'm not hard to find. DubLifeDiaries@gmail.com. Until next time, keep the engines humming and the wheels turning, and always follow the road that inspires you. This is Joe Person. I'm signing off. I'll catch you on the next ride.